Going down, everyone. And if you're tuning into this, I'm going to go ahead and give the breakdowns of what is the new 1912.2. And this is the brand new introduction of the 2020 software, and you're going to have to download it directly from the site. It won't be something that you can utilize the 2019 software to update. And once you get familiarized with the new overlay, you'll understand why. What we're going to be covering in this segment is the benchmarks and the pretty good improvements actually, but there are things you should know to get those. So we're gonna go over those as well as the function abilities of the AMD Link, which is pretty cool, but definitely needs some maturing, as well as the boost function is so, but there is stuff to talk about for as far as information and what you need to do to set these parameters to make the pixel points that you want to meet, as well as the installer and the software app and how get it, or when you will be able to get it if you are an iOS. So let's go ahead and jump in. And I wanted to showcase how cool this is. Like literally, I have full control over my computer, and this is like a portal in. I can literally start running benchmarks from my computer away from home because I have a really good bandwidth, and it lets you set up almost up to 50, which is insane. That's extremely top end, like coax copper, like I guess the most extreme you can get before you get to fiber. Fiber is usually about a gig up and down, usually from this part. But this is pretty cool. I can control everything. Going into games and port overs, it allows you to go into. Now the coloring of the desktop itself is kind of like meh, and the latency is roughly about 27 milliseconds, 28, which isn't too bad. And I haven't had a bandwidth drop from testing it, so this is really cool, honestly. Being able to utilize my Pixel 4 and fine-tune my computer. Now, you will get to some points where it gets really pixelated here and there, but the response time isn't that bad. I'd like to think if you had a pretty good computer at home and you link this. Now, the linking process is something that I want to talk about. Now, with us already covering that you can utilize your phone to portal in, and you can utilize certain programs, and then you can utilize your computer over it. So it's kind of like a little bit of a, not technically supposed to do it, but you can have full access to your computer. And I did run into some issues with going into there. You can kind of just see if you go ahead and you manage your devices in that situation, you're going to be given a point where you can add the device in that situation. And I'll give you a breakdown of how you can add the device, either QR, you can do it manually, or you can do it where it normally syncs. So sometimes your firewall is going to be up and you're going to have to take in it. It will take an explanation point near the mobile devices and tell you. You can also hit an auto configure with your firewall, so it helps you directly go inside of there. And make sure that the AMD server link is enabled, as well as the access and the connection is enabled too in order to do that. You can also do the VR, but I have no VR application, so I haven't installed that in order to test that directly on top of there. Once you do that, just press the plus. It'll lead you through those steps. I did it conveniently through trying the QR code. It kind of failed. I tried the other one. It kind of failed. But when I did the manual sync in, and it provides everything you need and like a stepping stone, you just have to select it and just type in what's in there, and you're pretty good. But make sure everything's enabled on that portion and auto config if need be, and it should sync directly, and you'll have access to your games from home in that portion. Just set up your testing and see what it's like and see if you like it. I mean, I think it's pretty decent so far. The coloring on the desktop I noticed was like but like when it got to the games it was okay. I think it doesn't really care about the desktop itself, so it cares more about the games and performance of that. So there's something about the Radeon card streaming itself to your phone application, which reminds me, you can see right there that it's basically an overlay that comes and mimics that of what's going on for my Pixel 4. And you can see right over here, the thing that I was going to point out that was kind of situational point is the upgrade advisory. This is one of the coolest tools that I kind of like, this integration points and how easy it is to recognize this situation where it says like, oh, hey, look, it's not available, because the core really doesn't count too much because it's more of a testing tool, if anything. So that's why it doesn't really care. But if you look at a game like the Darker Picture anthology of what they have for the Meta Mendine, it is not liking the CPU. It wants a more powerful CPU, ready or gaming CPU, probably like a 999K or KS would probably be fitting the bill to make it maximize best features. Versus all these other ones which are it's like it's ready. So I do like that. It comes into a media where you can actually upgrade a lot of your captured material, and it almost like a Photoshop overlay, utilize their resin tools. they did mention if you do have some issues with it, restart. I have not been able to directly utilize this, but like it definitely seems like something that would be really fun to kind of go with later on down the road. Or as far as like the media library and checking out there. Now the update when it comes into this, and I'm gonna go ahead and blow this up right now so everyone can see. You can see that checking for updates became so much more easier, and I like this. It gives you a point for point, just kind of seeing what's going down and enabling the portion. So now, what do you want to do when you enable the boost? And that's probably one of the bigger, more important things. What you want to do, your graphic portions. You go from your graphic portions and go to your Radeon boost. Now, toggling this back and forth is where you're going to start seeing the improvement. Now, from what I've heard, the resolution portion of what you want to make sure that you're at is like pretty much when you get down to the portion of where your physical boost is, you want to try to get it aimed up around, like there's a few levels that they're going to have, 50, the 66, and then the 83, and those are basically pertaining to the resolution increases. So from 4K 1440p to 1080p, those are the increasements that you're going to want to have. Then the increasements where you'll be able to see less in 4K versus more 1080p in these drops in resolution. So if you're utilizing 1080p, it's probably going to be wanting to have minimal resolution. You won't want it to look like 1080p going to 720 or less, versus where 4K you can kind of skim a little bit. But again, I'm a pixel person, so I'm going to try to put this as the best it can be, but that is probably going to come into a tear portion of where it's going to get less FPS improvement. Now I noticed per points scores where we came into, it was about 50 points extra on the DirectX 12 and 11 tests throughout the boards of what was in 3D Mark. So they did prove that this definitely does add it, but where the real gains come in, where they say 38% and all this other stuff on select titles, it definitely is going to filter there, but there is about a solid 10 to 7% increasement with overclocking the graphics card. Now, I brought down a little bit more of the other settings that it has down here, because there's a plethora of settings that you can kind of get into and a whole new playout of what you're going to be playing with. And you can go back to your basic display, and it's going to give you more of a color template for as far as what you can do in your HD links, side of the integral scaling, your GPU scaling modes, your FreeSync, you know, the super resolution, which I definitely concur that you want to put on. It makes a big as far as see inside of a card and make the resolution pop. Cool added function, you can do instant GIFs now for your gameplays, which you can disable or enable for as far as the situation in recordings. That's kind of cool for as far as coming into that. There's a lot of overlays coming into there for as far as the game streaming enabling, having everything else installed. All your controls you can get in the back of here, kind of adjust this in your inner profile, kind of set the bit rate which you want. Mine's adjusted just 30, should be perfect. That's pretty good actually. Microphone level, all the other situations, live stream directly inside of there. So they definitely upped their whole Radeon Live situation. Now, with that being said, everything kind of laid out, you can kind of update, you can kind of look at your overlays, browse your games, you can look at your maximum and average FPSs now, so it's like almost wrapping your stuff, which is pretty cool. I definitely like that. Like, it's, as a game creator situation of trying to test all these situations and look at it, it's kind of pretty cool situation. But looking at past that, how do we overclock? What ends up happening with that? How do we get past the media, the compatibility, its performance? Now you can go to streaming, which we kind of lightweight typed into there, and now I haven't tested it out personally myself. I use OBS, but going into here, you're going to see your metric overlays in a whole other way. Now you can, personally myself, I like this. You can kind of just go ahead and you can move your metric overlay to where we're kind of like quadrants, I suppose. I haven't gotten used to this yet, but maybe it's just going down on the keyboard. Oh, okay, it's there we are. So you press that and then it appears down here. But this basically tells you the overlay portion. I like it. It's a lot more stable than it was in the 2019. It was garbage. Now it's like completely stable, which blew my mind. Now, if you want to go past that situation and you want to go to your tuning inside of the situation, you have your basic 3 overlays, which you normally did, and they do okay. They give you like maybe like a 200 boost on points. But going to your manuals, and like I, you know, obviously have like been toying around with it, but this is where you're gonna break it down. You're gonna go into here. Now this is kind of cool if you're kind of getting into it. It kind of reminds me of like a CBR versus a VBR kind of, but unlike OBS where you're toying around with it, or there's other variations where you can get into like minute portions. But I personally like the advanced control. That's like your old OS where you can kind of get into gameplay for as far as that. Fan tuning's pretty cool. Now I noticed that this wasn't really working that well, but so that's why I went to go to the enable. It gives you the chart back. Same thing with power tuning. They'll give you your limitation. Now this is where it becomes a little bit more cooler, giving you the automatic portion. We go to basic timings of what it used to have, and then if you click this back over, it gives you the functional portions of that situations. Now same exact situations where you can add profiles and like load in. Myself, I already have something that I can just like load in right here. These are my new situations. Any frequency switches over. So you can kind of see like where my stuff is kind of like rolling for as far as like the far future situation where I'm like clocking it. Now this is the one thing I did like where it has down here, you can kind of fine tune. It's almost like a wheel. You can kind of dial in a little bit more expertise points. But for the most part, if you need to reset the situation, you're like, oh no, what's happening? You can always just go back to the metrics, kind of go back over here, and then this should appear. At that point in time, just hit this, and this is your back default. And runs everything back to the default in the situation. It's completely stable. I've noticed for doing overclocks, so if like it doesn't like it, it may just pause it. It may throw you out of the game. It might take you back to like where you're at, and you might need to restart. A lot of the times when you're having an issue with this, just restart the program really well. But that's pretty much it for as far as an introduction to the 411 on how to utilize everything for as far as this, and then we'll go to our patch notes. For as far as the situation goes, I was able to get some really great time spy like situations in, which reminds me we should go ahead and kick in one more score right now. We'll get a base score so we can kind of look at the overclocks versus underclocks, and we'll look at the patch notes while it's happening at the same exact time. So as you can kind of see what I've already importantly pulled up here, and we're going to scroll all the way up because I kind of did this earlier for a lot of people, but I did a way longer version and I wanted to break this down just super more simple, a little bit more finite for about 13-20 minutes at most. At the situation, what I'm looking at here is this the 12% improvement of the uplift with the Radeon software, and it definitely comes in, I would like to say maybe 12% at the max is what they're probably quoting, versus we're about 7 to 5% is your like mins to very min. I'm looking at like where the scoring is across the board, testing it for DirectX 11 and DirectX 12. Both of those were able to encumber great leaps within like the technology portions, where I was able to see more of just like insanely good boost across the board. I mean, fire strikes alone were pretty decent, but like, I mean, consistently once I tuned it and I did my normal overclock and I was already getting like 110, I was like, okay, well, let me try to push it a little bit farther, and it's way more friendly with overclocking. So that 12% isn't an overclocking. Once you go to the overclocking, you can kind of push that barrier, get to like, you know, like that 5, 7 to 12 on certain moments, but it's roughly about your median 7%. I'd like to say it's not really 12. Looking at the Radeon software, where it includes the new brand new modern accessibility, which we went over, you can quickly go into like right now, or if you wanted to get inside of a situation where you can kind of see, or if I can go back over to where the game feed is, where the chart is down below right there, you can click in that overlay through Alt R or Alt Z while in the game, and you can kind of turn on the boost as well if you haven't already, to kind of see the difference in the game base. But looking at past that in the situation of where you have your game tabs and the stabs of the media where it launches for as far as the Radeon Direct software, that's going to be a little bit more easier, as we saw the average FPS, looking at the more powerful streaming experience for most people. And I'm going to be more curious to hear what people have to say about that, because it was always making the Radeon list for patch notes before in the past. Performance past that, and the user profiles are a lot easier to configure within the raw software. You don't have to, it does it sometimes itself, and it's very intuitive. I noticed one time it told me it had an issue with something, and then it fixed it and just let me go to it directly. So it's a very intuitive software, but it might be too intuitive at certain points where you have to reset it. The Radeon boost, I don't think that that's like the biggest boost that they give you. It's kind of just like a little nudge. I feel like they could probably tune that a little bit better in the next few patches coming down to it. The integer display scaling coming in the pixels, that one's not too bad for as far as the pixel star goes into the retro art and going into that situation, which is cool for older games going into like more of a newer comp looking at it, so you're going to get more of a smoothness rather than a jagged. Looking at the display portion of the Radeon anti-lag, The 5000 series is one of the bigger portions where the DirectX 9 is going to, besides the global activation toggle, is an easier enable across the supported games. The image sharpening, as it comes down to the point right over here with the DirectX 11, being able to have the control portions of that and the degrees of what you can do inside of there. On the toggle on and off support while in game as well. The AMD Link, which we kind of showcased a little bit in the very beginning, which is playing the PC directly over in the network, as well as it comes down to the situation. Streaming, all the functions are easy accessible and up to the 50 megabits, which makes it very friendly. Now, one of the things that I thought was very cool is you can utilize the X265, which is wrong. They actually a typo. It's H265 because that's a GPU encoding portion of it, but it's no diff. It's just still processing core. So I mean, CPU to GPU lingo talk, I guess, but not like it's gonna break anything. But besides that portion, the instant GIF is also really nice on top of there with the one-click setup for as far as the factory resets inside of the off software. So if something goes wrong, you can now easily reset those. And the new options that become the setting and the installation during the factories of the resets and the improvement the installs and the direct errors. Now the media filter, which you can utilize for as far as upscaling pictures, so if you want to make your media art gallery a little bit more issuably going in the future, it's great. The fixed list is 5700 cards. Saw some experience with losing some screen display. That should hopefully be fixed with the memory error randomly on the R9 200 and 300 series and playing Fortnite with the API enabled, as well as the ring of Elysium and the experience of the 2K to 4K resolution performance issues. Star Wars and the Jedi and the Fallen Order also got an experience after a hang up of the installation of the cutscenes with the 5000 series. That's been fixed, as well as the performance metric overlay has been causing black screens across there, as well as the switching between the Radeon Relive causes also a blackout screen, as well as the fixable point of the HDR within Windows now hopefully fixed in this situation. Known issues make a lot of sense inside of this as they introduce a newer portion that rolls out. They're switching into the borders. Full screen is the performance overlay is enabled and the Radeon FreeSync is enabled, may cause shuttering. The Vulkan gameplay applications may crash after performing some tasks, and the Radeon image sharpening enabled, as well as applying the ML media filter, which in the Radeon software gallery may cause some memory to fail, releasing once completed. So that's, again, reset your computer. It's almost like crashing it for like your GPU when you're overclocking. Think of it that way. Just reset it. It should be fine. Integer scaling may cause some video content to be flickering during the less than native, as well as looking at the gameplay and the Radeon software may cause the Radeon FreeSync as well as the virtual super become enabled. The Relive may appear missing or not available installed on the R9 380 series, as well as the R9 285 series, the graphics products, as well as the Battlefield 5 making the hang-up list again for the Radeon Boost enable on the 5700 series card, as well as the performance resolution changes in the software overlays may appear as a hang-up or the TDR. Enabling the Radeon image sharpening in the HDR display may cause a color to become washed out and perform an upscaling large resolution video scale as far as what comes into the performance issues. Coming down to the portion of where we have the known issues among AMD, there's a whole bunch of issues that they are aware of for as far as the AMD Link, since it is very new. If you are downloading this on your Android, it's available today, iOS on December 23rd. As well as the tuning, the media in case of some of the situations maybe, as well as the media, and as well as streaming under 1 megabit may have a hang up, as well as the gaming under certain desktops and the gameplay, the last current streaming may stop if the device is left idle for 2 minutes. Now there's a whole bunch of other footnotes that go into the situations for variants if you are experiencing. I will reference these right there, but let's go ahead and get to some benchmark square offs. So not too shabby, coming in right there with a nice 1970. Let's go ahead and look at the direct results comparisons. So here's a great mock-up right here. For as far as looking at the very bottom, you can see where that was one of the original testing. So base to base, you can see that there is a pretty drastic reduction as far as what the way it's going to operate inside of there. Now, when you can look over to the very top 2 scores to the right, where Firestrike 21600 and then 214063, those are where your overclocks are for the old versus the new. So 2019 being the right, 2020 being the left of those. So the higher score and being able to push the overclock into like a whole other realm lies inside of these portions, because when I was able to get those, let me pull up the really fun score, which is right here. The test 6, which comes in at the little bit of a clutch portion of what you can kind of see right there. So while testing this, I did notice bases reduced. Like that's one thing you kind of saw, as like the top outs of the last one were kind of pushed. So I'm really excited to see what happens when across the board. So let's look at some more tests. Now we're looking at DirectX 12. This is even more interesting. As you can see, the very bottom score being the old 1911 or 1912.1 introduction, and you can see the one that's right next to it is the install that is the 19.12.2. So that's supposed to be the 2020 software. So there's a kind of a big drastic decrease, even with the boost enabled, which comes out to the 8053 score, which it gives into it. It even doesn't even cut close to where the old score used to be. But when you see its native overclock, it's okay. It's not the best in the world, but it's okay. Majority of times, the old one or doing another manual overclock, I would have roughly got about, I want to say, the old scores 83, 84. So going up and being able to get 87.5 is insanely good. And then being able to showcase the streaming app, which was the last one right there, where you see that the frequency hits at the 2022. That's when I'm streaming the app. So there is a reduction in use, and I wanted to test that too to showcase that in like 3D Mark tests. As you can see, it downscales, but it's still above what it would have normally been anyways. So I mean, like all in all, they did it really well. So far, this is a really insanely good like testing point of what they've been able to do. So let's go ahead and look at some extreme tests. I thought this would be a fun thing to kind of throw in a few other processors in the mix to kind of see the differences of what they can be doing with the 2950X and a 2970WX of the Theadripper lines and their different frequency portions of what they can kind of run, be able to kind of go up there. You can kind of see also that where we get to the major overclocks, 4109 is the brand new with overclocking headroom. That's why I do insist, play around with the overclock, see what's good with your actual physical card, because the unlocking power for this update comes in the overclock. Not their auto overclocks, not their boost mode, it's literally the overclock. There's a lot of headroom you kind of play with. And showcasing that where you can kind of see where the time spy extreme goes before, where I kind of like was able to kind of maximize a little bit of the headroom, and then was able to kind of push it a little bit farther. And then your base point right there for as far as the situation comes into gameplay. And you can see right now at me putting like the very bottom score that there is a big drastic difference when you're looking at where the overclocks of yesterday versus the overclocks of today, versus where almost like a 50-point increasement where we used to get inside of the situation for 4K where time spy extreme. So that's pretty big. I mean, honestly, I'm gaining percentages on benchmarks now because of AMD software. Now looking at the Firestrike extremes is where you can see an extreme increase. Looking at the new base, which is at the bottom of the 11611, versus where the middle, it's yesterday's 2019's overclock, and then the new overclock to the far left being 20s. So there's a huge increasement with almost 120 points in it being able to utilize the graphics card a lot more. And these extreme overclocks you get. So if you got a water block and like a really cool next gen card, these things are probably going to see a lot. And I heard there's a lot of good benefits from the 7X overclocked. Someone chimed in during my live streams of doing these, which you can check out too, me messing with Wattman and also doing the live installation that it worked with really well. As you can see, the last scores that we'll cover today is going to be the Firestrike Ultra, which is the brand new 2020 base right here, which being on the far portion right, the middle being 19 overclock, and then this being the new overclock with 20 in the far left. And you can see again there are increasements. The overclocks again was where it shatters it really well, and I got a lot bigger increasements too when I utilized the 3600 RAM. So I've been able to increase my score by on benchmarks by 350 points now because of software implications and utilizing a little bit more finer technology. But at this point, I'd like to say thank you so much for staying tuned. Tutorial of how to utilize more of the Radeon software and what it's offering, how to install it directly is keynoted down below. You can go pick your GPU and go inside of there. If you're new to the network, you can actually subscribe. It's absolutely free. As a creator, never ask for anything except for having a fun time. Leave a comment down below. What GPU do you have in the AMD family? What do you want to see in the near future? What are your experiences? You're very interested to hear what's happening in the real world. And if you subscribe today, who knows? Maybe me and Keanu Reeves will become the last two samurai. We'll battle around in some post-apocalyptic zombie world. Pretty badass. Should be. Anyways, you guys and gals have a nice day, and I'll see you in the future, Becky and Beckettes, for some really cool footnotes, patch notes, as we come into the future what AMD and NVIDIA are doing to improve their technology. Who knows what's next? Ray tracing?